Life Audio.
Welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations, your authority in navigating the world of homeschooling diverse learners. Featuring Peggy Ployer from SPED Homeschool, Annie Yorty from AnnieYorty.com, Leilani Melendez from Living with Eve, Stephanie Buckwalter from eLARP Learning, and Dawn Jackson from Dawn Jackson Educational Consulting and Tutoring. With over 75 years of combined homeschooling expertise, experiences, and perspectives, this group is eager to share their wealth of wisdom to empower your homeschooling journey. So grab your favorite mug, settle in, and get ready for insightful discussions, valuable insights, and practical tips as these experts and their guests dive into the hottest topics in homeschooling. Whether you're a seasoned homeschooler, just considering this path, or anywhere in between, you don't want to miss a minute of these enlightening conversations that will empower your child to thrive in their homeschool environment. Empowering Homeschool Conversations is starting right now. Join us to give your homeschool the power boost it needs to successfully educate the unique learners in your home.
Today, we're going to talk about financial strategies for families with disabled children. And my guest today is James Lange. James is the president of two interrelated companies that provide financial services to IRA and retirement plan owners, tax planning preparation CPA firm, and registered investment advisory firm that provides cutting-edge Roth IRA conversion strategies and money management. He is one of the few CPAs who is also an attorney, financial advisor, and 3 best-time selling author. He provides advice on topics of retirement, estate planning, and Roth IRAs, and has been featured on CNN, CBS, MSNBC, and the Wall Street Journal, Financial Planning Magazine, Kiplinger's, and hundreds of other sources. I am so excited to have you on the show today, James, and for you to be able to share with us. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Peggy. Thank you for having me. I hope to give your audience some great information.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here, and I can't wait for what you have to share. I was telling James, I said, sometimes, when I talk finances, my eyes gloss over, so my husband doesn't talk too much, so hopefully I will be the one who, if you're that way, will be making sure I ask enough questions and understand this so that, so you can too. So I usually just kick off the discussion with my guests by asking a little bit about their background and just to tell us why they're so passionate about the topic that we have, and anything else that you want to share with our audience, just so they can understand who you are and what perspective you're coming from.
Sure. I'll try to make the background quick and the why I'm doing it more important. So I have, for the last 35 years, I've been a CPA and an estate attorney and a financial advisor. And I typically serve people that had IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, some type of retirement plan. And then my daughter, who we were kind of hoping was going to be okay, turns out is not really going to be okay, is likely to never be able to work. And then the issue for us was, oh my goodness, we not only have to provide for her for the rest of our lives, which given my finances are probably realistic, but she has a condition that will not necessarily reduce her life expectancy. She could survive us by 40 or 50 years.
Wow.
Oh my goodness, how are we going to provide for her not only while we're here, but after we're gone? So this became almost like an obsession. It was what kept my wife and I up late at night. It was our biggest worry. But I had the perfect background to answer this. I came up with what I think is the best solution. I kind of put it together at first in articles and special reports. Then I got 2 wonderful co-authors to fill in some of the gaps that I didn't know. And we came up with this book, which, by the way, is going to be offered for free to your listeners. Which I humbly think is the best resource there is for parents of a child with a disability, at least on the financial side. So
awesome.
that is my
Yeah.
mission right now, is to get this information out there. Because I think that there can just be a world of difference between getting the planning right and not getting the planning right.
Oh, yeah.
The vast majority of the people don't get the planning right. Their children will suffer compared to the people who do, even if they have identical resources, identical investments, identical everything. Just by getting the planning right, both on the financial side and on the estate side, we can make a world of difference for our child with a disability.
That's awesome. Yes, it is one of those big stress points. And I know enough families and have met enough families that, the future just seems so scary because there's so many unknowns. And then you add in, well, what happens after we're gone? And maybe they don't have family that can step in and always provide the home, the services, everything that, and are there finances that can come into those areas? And so there's just so many questions, and so many variables that come into play too.
Peggy, I think you brought up a great point that the financial guys often overlook. A lot of times I would get so excited about the numbers and say, oh, okay, I've done all the projections. So our daughter's going to be $1.9 million better off in today's dollars than she would if we didn't do all these strategies. Isn't that great? And even for that only has $500,000, their kid's going to be better off by $289,000. Money. And that's very appropriate. But what I kind of didn't realize is the reduction in anxiety after you get the planning right. So my wife and I, it's like, oh, she's going to be okay because of these things that we did. And here's the thing that was a surprise. I didn't realize how anxious my daughter was about money.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yes.
She's a very bright kid. She's sitting there at 29 years old. She knows the kind of guy that I am, that I'm not going to just do nothing. But she didn't know that, hey, I put together a plan for you and you're going to be fine for the rest of your life. You might have non-financial problems, but financially you're going to be okay. And it is set up. And the nature of her condition, and I would say many people's condition, including, people that don't have a disability, is stress and anxiety makes almost everything worse.
It does. And then you make decisions that you shouldn't make too, based on those.
Yeah. And if you get that right, then all of a sudden there's a reduction in your and your child's anxiety. This is a great thing. And that is something hard to measure because you don't measure it in dollars and cents. But I would say in some ways it's as important or more important. Well, no, it isn't. I still care about the money, but I'll just say that it's very important.
Right. Yes. And it sounds like your daughter cared too. And to know that her future and the finances aren't something that she needs to stress about. How did you go about telling her about that as an example to maybe some of our parents who have kids that are stressed out about that?
Well, first of all, for a long time, I never wrote about children with disabilities because I thought that my daughter, if you were to meet her, you wouldn't know that she had a disability. And I kind of respected her privacy. And most of her friends don't have a disability. So I didn't want to go out to the world and say, hey, my daughter has a disability, but look what I've done. By the time she was 28 years old, not 21, but 28, I figured I could have an honest talk with her and tell her, kind of what we've done for her, and that I was very excited to share this information with the rest of the world. And she was 100% on board with it. She really was. So she was enthusiastic. Frankly, at one point before we knew she had a disability, it's always an issue of how much do you tell your kids about your finances. I chose a middle ground. I said, there's going to be enough money for your education, your college, even graduate school. So you don't really have to worry about that. But I didn't tell her that, we were planning well beyond that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
anyway, but she was so relieved and she was so happy. Now she happens to not be a spender, you know.
That's good. We will continue this conversation after a short break.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com.
I'm sure you can set up how the money is accessed depending on those inclinations too. I have 10 adopted siblings, all with special needs. So my parents have done some sort of trust or other things for them. And sometimes it's meant, allotted in certain amounts, or one of us, us biological siblings, have been able to manage those accounts and other things, but they've handled each individually because the individual is so different.
Yeah, boy, that sounds like a tough one. Well, hopefully today we'll just get into helping people that have maybe one or two.
Right.
that's just too much. That's overwhelming.
Oh, well, they did it over many years, so I think they just took one at a time too, and so that's probably good advice.
And unfortunately, you're never done.
Yeah.
You know, it's not something that you do one time and then you forget about.
Yeah. So have things changed in the landscape of this planning over time than where some things you may have looked into before and now you don't, or maybe somebody, a while ago met with somebody and they set something up and now they're going, is that still applicable?
This is what I would tell you in general. And this not only applies to disability, but it also applies to, I would say, a lot of times estate planning in general. And a lot of times clients would come in and say, well, gee, I haven't updated my will in 20 years. It needs to be updated. And when I look at the will, I say, well, the problem is that it doesn't need to be updated. The problem is it was wrong on day one. So of course, there's new laws, there's new techniques that attorneys have developed. I want to talk about one of them today. And it wasn't like it wasn't available 10 years ago, just nobody talked about it or knew about it. So I would say that the key is getting advice from the right person the first time. And unfortunately, this is going to sound like I'm telling people to go to somebody other than their existing, say, estate attorney. Sometimes there are certain areas that are specialty work. And I think unless you go to a specialist, the odds that your estate plan is going to be what you need is not wonderful. And I know that you had some, let's say, pre-interview questions to me about benefits. And I'll tell you what the best source of information for benefits was for us. Now, again, it's going to be a state-by-state question, so they have to look for the resources of their state. But our estate attorney, who is not the firm I've worked with and owned for 30 years, but our specialist, she had social workers on staff who helped us with those exact problems. So sometimes it does, again, I'm not trying to take anybody away from an attorney that they're happy with. I'll just say that sometimes some specialty information is useful.
Right. So, working with a group of people versus, and that's something we recommend in homeschooling too, is there's usually not one person who has all the answers. There's just so much information out there that you have to focus on one person to do one thing, but then it's nice to have them all talking to each other sometimes because it's hard to keep all that information straight.
And that's not easy, especially getting an attorney to change their mind about anything.
Yes.
because I'm going to be making some recommendations when we get into it. Now, people are going to go to their attorney and say, well, gee, can I have this? And the attorney is most likely to say, oh, and they're going to try to come up with reasons why not. And then your client's or your audience is going to be in a bind. Well, now what do I do? So they have to make the decision themselves. Of what they want. Or maybe they'll get lucky and the attorney says, hey, that's a good idea. Or maybe the attorney, maybe it's even in the documents, but I would guess that out of 100 of your listeners, that there's not more than one or two that have one particular idea that I have for your listeners. It won't apply to everybody, but it'll apply to a lot of them. But it should be in a lot more people's documents, especially if you're talking about children who are less than 18 years old and it's not clear what their future is going to be.
Yeah, which is a lot of our audience. And I totally want to agree with, that specialist idea too, because I just found out from my sister that my dad has to completely redo his will because he picked a friend who was an attorney to do that. And with all of my adopted siblings and all the things, she's like, well, we got to get it redone. And now. So yeah, we're kind of going through that personally. So
that sounds like a nightmare. 10 specialty trusts.
I won't refer them to you.
I'm not a practicing lawyer. Well, I don't have a law firm anymore. I'm going to present information I think is critical.
Yeah. Well, we may need that.
But I'm more of a financial guy in the financial strategies. We want to talk about that too, but I want to make sure that your audience gets value during this and maybe life-changing value.
Yeah, that's super important. So a family coming in, they've got a young child, and like in my situation, when my oldest was kicked out of kindergarten and came home, he was punching holes in walls. We really thought we're headed to a group home someday. And we just got to make it through, and do the best we can to help him to get the skills that he needs, so he can be functional in that situation. Well, things changed over time, but at that point in our life, we were planning, for the possibility that we were not going to be able to care for him long term, maybe not even until he was 18 because he was so violent.
Well, let's talk about what to do when you have a child and it's very hard to predict that child's future. Yeah. And just so we can have measurement points, let's say that there's going to be a Y and there's going to be two roads. One is, even with all the difficulties, your child's somehow going to get through and will be able to get a job that he or she will be able to support themselves. Yeah. Okay. Which, to oversimplify, usually means they're not going to qualify for government benefits like SSI or SSDI. Right. All right. Now let's go down road number 2, which is they won't be able to, like my daughter, unless there's a massive reversal, she's never going to be able to provide for herself. And she did qualify for, in her case, SSDI, but it could be SSI also. Okay. And since most of your audience has kids who are less than 18, I won't talk about how critical it is to qualify for SSI or SSDI. But for most of your audience, since up until age 18, they include the financial resources of the parent. Unless the parent is pretty much broke, they're not going to qualify for a government benefit. Right. And that's not my area of expertise. But let's talk about what you could do and what I would be recommending to you when your oldest presents in a way that, I don't know if he's going to be okay or not. Right. Okay. So let's say at the time, if something happens to you and your husband, you want to make sure he's taken care of. So the natural thing to do is say, okay, well, if my husband and I die, and let's keep it simple, with one child, I want everything that we had to go into a trust, and the trust will provide for that child for the rest of the child's life. Okay? Well, you could have kind of what's called maybe a standard creditor protection trust. And the idea is it protects the child, A, from himself, from making stupid decisions, and B, from any creditors, maybe a future ex-spouse, maybe he is in a car accident. Maybe he starts a business and it doesn't work. And you have these creditors out there who want to reach your child's money, but the good news is you put that money in a trust, and it has certain restrictions. Typically, there's a trustee, whether it's a family member or a bank or a fiduciary or a financial institution. And that's one way to go. But the problem with that is that typically those trusts will eliminate the possibility of your child getting SSI or SSDI or other government benefits.
Oh, okay. That's
so you, and frankly, here's my viewpoint. If you have a child with special needs, it's going to be a tough road, no matter what.
Yep, exactly.
It's going to be tough. You have to do everything you can to get every single dollar you can out of the government, whether it's a direct benefit, an indirect benefit, a tax benefit. You need it all, and even then it might be tough.
Right.
So doing that type of standard trust that will eliminate or even worse, cause your child to have to give back benefits that they received, then you and your husband die. All right, so that's terrible.
We will continue this conversation after a short break.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com.
So what do you do then? Well, there's something called a special needs trust. And this special needs trust is drafted in such a way that the trustee doesn't have quite as much power, but just enough power so that they can help the child, but not enough power that the government can say, hey, that's really the child's money, therefore we're going to eliminate your benefit. No, the idea of the special needs trust is it does preserve the government benefit, which could be enormous. I mean, a couple $100,000 is just the beginning of what that benefit can mean.
Right.
But the problem with that trust, this special needs trust, is it is much more restrictive than the general creditor protection trust. So let's take a look at you when Thomas was displaying problems and presenting problems. And the truth is, you didn't know how he was going to do.
Right.
Now, by the way, you took the liberty of telling me not the end of the story, but that he's doing very well now. He has his business.
Yeah, he's a biomedical engineer. So yes, living on his own.
So you apparently did a great job, and people should listen to your information about raising kids. But we're talking about the money. So, but here's the issue: if you had done that general protection trust, which now probably would be the right thing, because you still are a little leery about giving him everything all at once. At least I would be anyway. So you have, despite the fact that he's an engineer, but you'd be maybe a little leery, but the special needs trust would have all types of restrictions that you would not want to burden him or the trustee with.
Got it.
So the issue is, which of those two do you use? And one of the problems is, maybe things look good for a while, so you say, oh, okay, we'll just use the general. Then things fall apart. Oh, we better need the special needs. And then, how many times you want to redo your will? And maybe the day before you die, or even after you die, things change.
Things change, yeah. Absolutely.
So this is, let's say, one of the dilemmas that I think a lot of people who just don't know how their kid is going to turn out has. So here's the answer.
Okay, yeah.
You don't decide now what type of trust you're going to draft.
Oh, really?
You draft both of them, and you let the trustee decide what type of trust the money goes in based on more information than we have now. So let's say that something happened to you and your husband tomorrow, all right? And you had that original you had that original creditor protection trust that doesn't protect benefits. Well, maybe your son doesn't qualify for benefits, but you want him to have all the advantages of that money. That would be a good solution. But if it went the other way and he did qualify for benefits, then you have the wrong thing. So this toggle will allow, at your and your husband's death, the trustee then, let's say, says, oh, okay, Thomas doesn't need a special needs trust. He needs a regular creditor protection trust. So I'm going to hit the creditor protection toggle.
Oh, okay.
Or, and by the way, this might be very interesting for your family with multiple people with a disability, and who knows what's going to happen. So you could have you could have in effect, different trusts, and you could have the trustee toggle to regular creditor protection or special needs, and they make that decision not now, but after the person who wrote the will dies. Oh,
really? That can be done too.
Yeah, because frankly, you're not going to know, and it's possible there's going to be a change even after death. But I don't want to get too far afield. I'll just say that this is a not well-known technique, and very few non-specialists are going to know about it. And unfortunately, even a lot of special needs attorneys know about it. So I wanted to bring that new idea. The other thing is, if the underlying asset is an IRA or a retirement plan or a 401k or 403b, that trust must meet several specific conditions in order for the beneficiary to get a great, what's called an inherited stretch IRA. Which is, by the way, that might account for roughly $1 million of the $1.9 million that our daughter will be better off, because she'll be able to stretch or defer distributions on her inherited IRA and inherited Roth IRA over her lifetime. Right. If she didn't have a disability, she'd have to take out everything in 10 years. Which is another reason why it's so critical to get the SSI and SSDI designation. But people do that because of their income and their assets until their child turns 18. Right.
Yeah. That's a lot to think about. So at this point, there's only those two trusts in that are available. What happens if, there's, because I'm sure at some point there was only one kind and then some law put that into effect. So right now, those are the ones that you can build into that.
Yeah, and this is what I would say. I would say most people have gone one way or the other.
Oh, okay.
In other words, they went to an attorney that might not have known anything, and he did a general creditor protection trust. Or maybe you go to a special needs attorney, and even though the child, before the child's 18 and you can't apply for SSI or SSDI, you literally don't know if the child's going to qualify or not. And unfortunately, it's harder to qualify than people think.
Right.
We barely were accepted. And my daughter, I'll tell you, she would not be able to get it together to get a job, or even, it just wouldn't happen. So to me, it would be like, well, of course she should qualify, but we had to fight like cats and dogs to get an exception, to get her approved. Yeah. And by the way, we lost our first application. We had to do it on appeal.
Yeah, that's good information to know, because I think a lot of people don't realize that it's an ongoing process. Our middle child is going through a lot of that stuff right now, and so the more information, the more you work with those disability service people, and the more documentation you can give them, and all of that is very helpful in that process.
Well, one of the gaps in my knowledge was the best way to apply for SSI or SSDI. And I was fortunate enough to recruit Debbie McFadden, who is, if she isn't the country's top expert on getting a kid qualified for SSI and SSDI and vocational rehabilitation help, etc. She's certainly one of the very top. And that is part of our book, which might not be quite as relevant if your child is still young. But even if the child is like 15 or 16, it takes a long time to do this, and you need third-party letters from doctors and teachers, and or in your case, I'm not sure, where the letter would come from, but even homeschool, I assume, has some type of group activities. So maybe from the group activity counselor or whoever it might be, but I usually say getting qualified for SSI and SSDI is mission critical. That's number one. The only reason why I'm not stressing it is because most of your audience has their kid is younger.
There's younger. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of places, they tell you, we just leave that off until, they're older because they don't qualify for it. But the problem is like you were just talking about, it's all the documentation, all the letters, all that. You have to have that all collected during that time period and leading up to it to show there's been no change, to show that there is a need, to show that the need is continuous, that how extensive it is. I don't think yet a lot of times we understand and if you had to do that all like in months, it's impossible. It's very, very difficult.
Well, not only that, but frankly, if you're an estate attorney like I am, you see young, healthy people die. That's just the reality of life. So I want those documents in place. I want the right document. And if you have a special needs child, there's special considerations, even the issue of guardianship. Yes. That's going to be much harder for a kid with a disability, and particularly a kid with a behavior problem, than it is, for somebody whose kid, is doing fine.
Yeah.
So this is not one of those things that you want to let go and say, I'll do it later, and et cetera. This, you want to do this right. And the other thing is, it's not too early to, start planning a future for both yourself and for your child. And that's really more my area. I'm talking about these other things, but that's let's say, my strength. And I don't even know if we're going to get to that today, but I hope we will.
Yeah. Yeah.
But frankly, of the three missions or the three action points, one, getting your kid qualified for SSI or SSDI, which might not be quite as relevant if your child is very young. Two, getting wills, trust, beneficiary designations, guardianship provisions, everything having to do with dying.
Yeah.
Okay. And three is getting the financial side right, which is, let's say, interrelated with the wills and trust. But I'm going to put my area the last compared to the first two, because the first two are mission critical.
Well, they set you up right for whatever your investments are and where they need to go, and what that child then will fill in the gaps more so than, so you're planning, from now to extensions and out further.
Yeah, you also made a very good insight where your investments go. You didn't say what you are invested in, because I don't think any financial advisor can look you straight in the eye and say, oh, this stock is going to do great, this one's going to do badly, this index fund's going to do great, this one's we're taking our best shot. Yep. But here's what we can do. We can get the strategy right. How much of our money in our retirement plan should be Roth? How much should be regular? Should we start an ABLE account? Mom and dad want to help out. What strategy should we use? Grandma and grandpa.
Right.
What strategy should we use for, grandma and grandpa to help provide for our child? All these are strategy questions. And that's the kind of thing that I really love. But again, the first two, SSDI, SSDI, and getting your estate planning right. Yeah.
Yeah. So would any financial advisor have worked with both of those types of trust funds and be familiar with the differences in those?
Probably not. And the other thing is, most financial advisors don't work. I'll just say that my solution, which I think is easy and I can't understand why it's not in the literature all over the place. And before I even present it, this is going to sound a little arrogant, but this is what I think. Some things are very, very hard to measure. The homeschooling technique number 1 versus the homeschooling technique number 2.
Right.
Well, maybe number 1 works better for one kid. Maybe number 2 works better for another kid.
Exactly.
Maybe one really is better, but it's very, very hard to prove. Okay. So there's, experts on both sides of the issue, both genuinely believing their position and both trying to convince the parent that their position is right. All right.
Yeah.
And you might say, well, gee, Jim, what's different than you? You're going to say why your financial solution is right while the other guy's isn't. All right. And my answer to that is it's math. When you're talking about strategies, and let's just keep it to one issue. How much should I convert to a Roth IRA? When should I convert to a Roth IRA? Okay. Just one little piece of the overall big financial picture. Okay. It's a matter of math of how much and when to convert. Are there unknowns? Sure. We don't know future tax rates. We don't know future investments. But if you take any set of even semi-reasonable assumptions, okay, the investment's going to grow at 4%, the taxes or let's say what they're going to be now, or some people think they're going to go up, some people think they're going to go down, whatever set of assumptions you're going to make. You say, okay, well, here's if you do the status quo and you run the numbers, on a straightforward, well, it used to be an Excel spreadsheet. Now there's obviously very fancy software, but you do the projections and maybe it's a gradual increase during your lifetime. And then after you're gone, then presumably your child is spending that money, hopefully in the right type of vehicle. Or you use all the recommendations that I'm going to make with regards to Roth IRA conversions. Well, instead of being here, the estate is here. And it's not opinion, it's math.
Right. Yes, exactly.
So when I hear like an advisor saying, I don't believe in Roth IRAs, I don't, it sounds disrespectful, but I just think he's wrong or she's wrong. And my answer is, okay, where's the peer review articles that they have written that have proven their math that says Roth IRAs aren't good? Oh, they didn't write one. Well, gee, I wrote one. I wrote the first one. I wrote a book on Roth. Every book I've written since 1998 has had major portions of Roth IRA conversion advice. And I've had, probably thousands of nitpicking CPAs that want to tear my hair out and show how wrong I am. And nobody's sent me, and people have sent me spreadsheets. And then I found the flaw in their spreadsheet. So I guess my point is, a lot of this is math. And it's math that our child will be $1.9 million better off in today's dollars because of what we did. And even somebody with a $500,000 IRA can be better off by $289,000 in today's dollars. And that, by the way, doesn't even include government benefits. If you include that, it's even more. So you can tell I'm kind of passionate about this because I think the difference between getting this part right and getting it not getting it right is a major difference in the quality of life for both you and your child.
Yeah. Definitely. Yes. And, there are some things that are just predictable and they can be followed. I mean, as a physicist, I love math. But yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't pick up that you were a physicist. All right. Then I think that you would enjoy the math part of the book because, I have some fairly thick nerdy sections and then I have the summary at the end. If you don't feel like reading all the nerdy stuff, here's the answer.
Right. That's good. Yeah. We had one viewer said that she had an Able United accounts for her children. Can you, if parents don't know what those are, could you just mention
I love
quickly?
Able accounts. So how how when you talk about food, you want to make it sound like something else? So somebody says, well, what do frogs' legs taste like? And you say, well, do you like chicken? So what are ABLE accounts like? They're kind of like 529 plans. So what it is either you or somebody else put some money into an account. You don't get a tax deduction for the contribution. Okay. And it goes into this account for the benefit of the child, presumably with a disability, although there's a much lower threshold that will qualify for an ABLE account. It will grow income tax free, and distributions are allowed for a pretty wide range of costs that the child might incur later in life. So let's say you put in $10,000 or let's say you put in $20,000 and it's invested at 7% and it sits there for 10 years. So now it's $40,000, and now let's say your child has some medical expenses or care expenses or whatever the expenses are. Right. They can take money from that account, withdraw it income tax free, and use it to pay for their expenses. And one of the things I love about it is they will not count that account as the child's income or assets for qualifying for SSI and SSDI. So sometimes we use that account for, let's say, some of this, let's call it extras that might not be allowed in one of those more restrictive trusts that I talked about that do protect the government benefit. So I would say an ABLE account is a great thing that most children with a disability who have either parents or grandparents or somebody who cares about them that has some money, I think I won't say that that's the life changer. I would say getting the wills right, getting the Roth right, particularly on big numbers, those are the life changing. But ABLE, yep. It's a good thing, and the only problem is that there's limitations on both contributions and how much you're allowed to have invested, and that's the biggest limitation.
Right. Yeah. So there's where, a financial advisor would be able to help you to figure out and balance where those funds that you have, that you're putting into things need to go, what availability you would have, and all answer all those questions.
Let me, at the expense of some of the financial advisors, tell you that a lot of them aren't going to know. All right. This is a specialty area. That's one of the reasons. And it sounds like I'm plugging the book, but I'm plugging a free book. We cover that pretty extensively in this book. And I want every single person who's listening to download this book for free and look at it.
And we'll have the link in the show notes too. So you'll be able to just click on it.
Okay, I want them to get the book, read the table of contents. Nobody's going to read this. Well, that's not true. There's a few people who have read this beginning to end. I suspect that they have major sleep problems, but most likely, and frankly, it wasn't meant to be read beginning to end. It was meant to
of a resource.
Read the table of contents. Yeah. Oh, that applies to me. Oh, maybe this does. So I better check out this section. And they can, for do-it-yourselfer, they're great. Or it might be great to have some background to both choose the appropriate advisor, CPA, attorney, etc.
Yeah. Or even ask the right questions.
Or ask the right questions.
Yeah. Come in informed. Yeah. Because too often we're just not informed, and then we don't know what to ask, and we just expect that the person we're working with has all the answers. And like you said, they may not.
Well, your clients aren't going to like this, but one of the things that we do when I work with clients, and I've been doing this for many years, and it's partly because I'm only licensed to practice in Pennsylvania, and I don't even have a law practice anymore, but I can't help myself. I am not going to do a masterpiece on the financial plan with a botched will, trust, and estate plan. I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
So I always ask for their will, their trust, the beneficiary designation of their retirement plan. And I would say I'm hardly ever happy. Really, there just aren't that many good attorneys who get it right, either in the area when the underlying asset is an IRA or in the area of when the beneficiary either is or could end up being a child that does qualify for SSI or SSDI. So you really want to make sure you go to the right person and maybe even have somebody independently review it, because unfortunately, a lot of times people don't know that their documents are wrong, and then they die with the wrong documents, and then the kid ends up, for example, just one wording problem has to take, if you have to take out $1 million in 10 years because somebody botched it, as opposed to taking out that $1 million over your whole life and deferring the taxes.
Right.
The math on that is the kid is $1 million better off by having the wording right. Just that one little thing. The kid's $1 million better off. So you want to get, and here's the other thing. Let's say, for discussion's sake, I'm going to use your family. I'm just going to keep it to two. Okay. Let's say one kid is fine. You know, they're going to go out and get a job. They're doing the appropriate things. They're on a good track. Maybe they're homeschooled for other reasons, but they don't have to be. And that kid, and let's say that you botched the estate plan, all right? And that kid ended up getting $500,000 less than he could have than if you had got it just right. Is that a bad thing? Oh, yeah. Would that be a cause of frustration to him and to everybody involved? Oh man, Peggy really botched this. If she would have done it this way, it would have. So it would be bad, but it would not be a tragedy, because that kid presumably can go out and get a job and support himself. Right? What if you did that for a kid who couldn't go out and get a job, couldn't support himself, and that kid was $500,000 worse off? That is a financial tragedy. Right. So the stakes are a lot higher if you have a kid who either, will qualify for SSI or SSDI, or maybe they won't, but you still want to handle it right. And we didn't talk much about my area, which is Roth IRA conversions, but that's going to be a huge issue. And I don't know why it's not all over the literature. And we can have a more technical discussion about why it is. But again, I'm going to maintain it's math.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I don't think we can go much deeper for our audience. They tend to have a lot going on in their heads already. But I do want to put up your website for the disabledchildplanning.com is where they can find your book.
Well, actually, if we could, because I wanted to do a special offer just for your folks. Oh, okay.
All right. Yeah. So you'll have to get me that.
Well, it's disabledchildplanning.com/podcast.
Okay.
Because
let me do this then. I will.
And the reason for that is I wanted the regular website. We're not giving the book away to everybody, but I wanted a little special bonus for your group.
There we go.
And that's it. Very good. So that particular website /podcast, it has a place people can sign up for the book, and they get a digital version, and it'll come practically immediately for free. And the other thing is we're having a summit for parents of a child with a disability
too.
All right. And I'm sorry, I didn't update you. Same website, podcast.
Oh, okay. All right.
So just disabledchildplanning.com/podcast.
Okay. And all that information is on that same.
So they can sign up for the summit. They can sign up for the book. The summit's going to be very cool. We have content speakers. We have financial people. We have Tatiana McFadden, who is one of the top athletes with a disability in the world. And then we have all kinds of specialty folks. We have some people talking about raising a child with autism, and somebody talking about meditating for a child with a disability, and all and their caregiver, and all types of. It's not just about money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's pulling all of everything in your life together, and a lot of times it's in a lot of disarray because our kids have so many needs that sometimes everything just else gets put to the wayside, and we tend not to focus on what we need to do to make it to the next day and the next day and future planning. But being being set up right each day helps us be set up right long term too.
Yeah, I wish it was easy. And I tried to make it as easy as possible. That's why our table of contents alone is 16 pages. So people don't have to read it. So if you're like the idea of the toggle trust, for example, boom, you look at the table of contents, you see, oh, there it is, page 264. So you go right to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's all great information. And just so you all know, again, we'll put all the show notes in there, but disabledchildplanning.com/podcast. And you'll be able to find all of James's information as well as the book he talked about and the conference coming up. And just any closing comments for our viewers and just something encouraging to if they're this is all new.
This is what I would say, and I'm going to sound like a stern parent for a minute, but I heard an interesting definition of learning, and learning is a change of behavior. Yeah. So I think a lot of times, just by the nature of your show, and maybe on things that are, let's call it softer, people listen. They hear, maybe they get some ideas, but maybe they don't implement anything immediately. Yeah. Or they think, well, that's nice information. Let me tell you what would make me most unhappy. Even if you got this book, and even if you read some of the chapters, and even if you went on that summit that we're having, where we have these powerhouse guests that have tremendous information, and at the end you said, well, that's nice, I'm just going to go back, oh, geez, Jerry's just spilled the milk again, I have to go. Somehow get this together. You're going to feel so much better. If you have a financial plan, if you have your wills and trusts in place, if you have your Roth IRA conversions and everything is maximized, the reduction in anxiety for you and depending on your child is really substantial. So, and I'm trying to make it as easy as possible. You can get the book for free. You can go to the summit. It's a virtual summit. You can watch from your living room. It's free. Get the resources. But don't just get them and say, that's nice. Get the resources and then take action.
Absolutely. Yes. That anxiety. I mean, it goes a long way when you start to get rid of that. And even if it's just a little piece by piece as you're moving forward, you can't do all of this all at one time. But like you said, there's 3 steps. You gave us 3 steps, one step at a time. But that anxiety will reduce every step you take. And because you're actually putting it into action versus just worrying. No, because otherwise we've just added more to their plate to worry about. Maybe they weren't even thinking about it in the first place.
I just made it worse. I didn't really think about it. Oh, I was miserable before. Now I'm really miserable because I realize all my documents are wrong. And I don't have the energy to take care of it. So now I'm going to be more miserable and more anxious.
We don't want that. No, that was not the purpose of this.
No, we want people who are, to be fair, if you're raising a child and you're homeschooling them, those aren't people that are afraid to take action. Yes, if anything, they're already overwhelmed. Yes.
They've taken the issue at hand and they're moving forward. And so this is just another thing. And parents, it's in your hands and it's in good hands. James has some great information that you can use to take those steps and to take them with confidence. So I just want to thank you, James, for sharing with us today, for making your resources available, and just being willing to bless our community with the knowledge that you have.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Peggy. And what you're doing, at least in Yiddish, is known as a mitzvah, which is making the world better and doing an important service for which it sounds like you're not making any money at all. In fact, it's probably costing you resources. So
it is.
On behalf of me and your audience, thank you for what you are doing.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to hang on a little bit longer because some of you posted some questions that I wanted to address, but didn't want James to hang around. He has another interview to go to. So I just want to thank you for joining us, James, with your busy schedule. And we'll definitely be pointing people to you and your resources, and we'll share all those links that you gave us for our
Very
audience.
good.
So,
Thank you
all
so
right.
much, Peggy. All
Yeah,
right.
have a great rest of your day. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, everybody. I saw some questions come in that we saw. Well, we had a couple that come in live. I'm going to go to those first. We had some recorded ones, but I know if you put them in live, that means yes, you're probably here still. Misty, you said that you have a child with dyslexia, that you homeschool. Are funds available? And then you said you live in Texas. The state doesn't provide any funds at this point. There are no ESAs in the state of Texas that you can invest into or pull from. There's other states that have those options, but you can, if you desire to use services from the public school, you can request from your district to get your child evaluated. And once that evaluation process is started and the request is put in, they will do an unenrolled student IEP evaluation. And then you can, from there, decide if the services that they say that they can provide you is something that you want. So just know that if you go through the process and you don't like what you get, you don't have to take it. And they can't do anything to you for not accepting it either. So, and that is usually across the board in most states. What happens is the funding that goes for children with disabilities through the Individuals with Disability and Education Act, 10% of that is allotted to homeschool and private school students, which most homeschools in states are considered private schools. So anyways, you have that ability. Each district, though, allots that money in different ways. So some people I have talked to that have gone through this process are over the moon. They get everything they want. It's exactly how they would like it. And others walk away with nothing. So especially dyslexia, though, I'm going to put this little extra caveat on there that usually the only extra services they provide children with dyslexia are a reading specialist and extra time. So that extra time, of course, you have more of at home, and sometimes just a good reading program might be the best. So I would say look through some of our videos, too, on our YouTube channel. We've got over 1,000 of them. Search reading. See some of the experts that we've interviewed on this show over the years, and you might find some resources, connect with some people. It's just like when we had a discussion about homeschool conferences, my team and I, and we were talking about just people that provide curriculum. They may provide the same type of methodology of curriculum, but there may be somebody who writes it that really connects with you and someone who doesn't. So really get to know that individual who writes the curriculum or who heads up that curriculum company, their philosophy, because a lot of that will go into how they write the curriculum, and then you're using it in your home every day. There's little bits you can change, but we're all taxed for time. You don't want to have to change anything you don't have to. So anyways, that's just some information on that question that you have. And then that would be the same kind of answer. Megan had asked any advice on therapies and doctor visits. Unfortunately, doctor visits, that would be under insurance unless you have Social Security. If you can't cover all of those things, it may be a secondary. But as far as therapies go, you can request that from your school district. Now, just understand that district services are only meant to bring your child up to a level playing field with their peers. Once they hit that, if they're just a little bit below what they would call normal, once they get to what the district would call normal and functional, they stop services until they fall back below again, which is a vicious cycle. If you were to do private therapy, of course, they would know and continue to provide services. But of course, that is out of pocket usually. Usually insurance companies will cut off being compensating you for therapies once a child becomes school age, knowing that the school would cover that. And then once they go out of school age, 18 to 21, they'll start covering services again. So that's just a little background understanding with some of that. And James didn't have any information with IRS. I know, Brooke, you asked a question, but filing taxes with the IRS on a first-party special needs trust. He did address a little bit of that trust information as far as taxes go. But if you need more information on that, I would say check out his book. And it's free, so why not? Get the copy and dig through that 16-page table of contents and find what you can do. And there was another question from Tessa about retirement, autism living communities. I'm assuming those trusts can be set up for that as well. And so I would say, again, to go through the book and find that information. The last one is not related to really any of this, but one of our viewers asked if a child can get held back a grade due to poor performance. I'm going to answer this from both sides. In public-private school, yes, the school has a determination of what level that child is learning at and whether or not they can advance with their peers. Now, you as a homeschooler, usually we don't fail children. A lot of times kids within our community are at different grade levels for every subject. And sometimes it's, even if the child doesn't have a struggle and they're homeschooled, they don't know how to tell peers what grade they're in. When I teach at my studio, I have a lot of homeschool students, and they get in a group and everybody's like, well, what grade are you in? What grade are you in? And I could see the homeschooler just sitting there going, how do I answer this question? And I had one little girl just answer it so distinctly that she said, well, I'm doing 5th grade math and I'm doing 4th grade reading. And they all just kind of looked at her dumbfounded, and I just kind of wrapped it up and said, yes, she's homeschooled. But a lot of times you just have to pick and choose like we did for our kids. It's what peer group are they going to stay in? Because you don't want them to like go to a different church level each year and change friends. That's just too hard. So just pick a peer level and continue on with that as far as what grade level they would be in, if that's where your question's coming from. So just a few answers to some of your questions. We love to get your questions. We'll be doing another co-host. We pre-recorded another discussion on the emotional needs of special needs moms. Incredible discussion. So you're going to want to watch out for that broadcast coming up soon, and the podcast. But lots more guests coming up. Actually, next week, I have on unlocking the powers of reading. We're going to overcoming dyslexia with breakthrough insights. So we're going to dive into dyslexia. And actually, I've got Dr. Jan Bedell on in a couple more weeks after that, talking about dyslexia as well. So lots of reading things coming up. Other things on teaching kids who are older. And so, just check into our show schedule and all this coming up. Some of my co-hosts are going to be hosting through the summer because I'll be traveling. I'll be at a lot of conferences, which I'm excited to meet a lot of you out there and to have some good conversations. So anyways, thanks for joining us here on Empowering Homeschool Conversations. And until next week, God bless, take care, and I will see you then. Bye, everybody. I want to take just a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on this podcast. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you'll find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and more.
This has been Empowering Homeschool Conversations.
Everyone wants to change the world. Capital Ministries is doing just that, one heart at a time, by creating disciples of Jesus Christ among political leaders in the U.S. and foreign nations. For more than 25 years, founder Ralph Drollinger has written Bible studies specifically for public servants. Study along with us and learn what the Bible says about capitalism, communism, abortion, same-sex marriage, and other contemporary issues. Subscribe and follow us at lifeaudio.com or search Capital Ministries on your favorite podcast platform.